It was the early 1970s on a film set in Hong Kong, and a young, cocky stuntman named Jackie Chan was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. At the time, Jackie was just one of dozens of extras and bit part performers scrambling for work in the city's booming martial arts film industry. He was fast, fearless, and hungry. And like every young man in that world, he believed he had something to prove. What he did not fully appreciate, at least not yet, was exactly who it was he was about to challenge. Bruce Lee was already a phenomenon. Though he had not yet released the films that would make him immortal in the eyes of global audiences, Enter the Dragon was still in production. His reputation on the streets of Hong Kong, in the gyms, and on the film sets of Shaw Brothers and Golden Harvest was unimpeachable. He was working on the film Game of Death, an ambitious project that would showcase his philosophy of martial arts in pure, unfiltered form. The production brought together some of the most dangerous fighters in Asia, and Jackie Chan was among the crowd of stunt performers hired to fill the background. Jackie, by his own later admission, was itching for a fight, not out of malice, but out of youthful recklessness and a desire to test himself against the best. And who better to test yourself against than the man standing right in front of you, the most talked about martial artist on the planet? According to Jackie Chan's own recollection, shared in interviews over the years and detailed in his autobiography, what happened next was both terrifying and illuminating. During a break in filming, Jackie approached Bruce with a bold, almost reckless energy. There was a casualness to his challenge, the kind of bravado only the young and uninformed can muster. He telegraphed a punch in Bruce's direction, perhaps expecting a bit of playful sparring, perhaps expecting to impress the crew. He did not impress anyone. What followed was a humbling in the truest sense of the word. Bruce Lee, with a speed and economy of movement that Jackie would spend decades trying to describe accurately, neutralized the situation entirely. There was no dramatic showdown, no loud clash of fists. There was simply a quiet, instant demonstration of the gap between a student and a master, a gap so vast that Jackie, in that moment, felt it in his bones. Bruce reportedly placed his finger, just one finger, against Jackie's nose, gently but with complete control, and held it there. The message was unmistakable. I could have done anything to you just now, and there would have been nothing you could do about it. Jackie felt the tip of Bruce's finger and understood everything. He was not a fighter in that moment. He was a student receiving his first real lesson. To understand why this moment affected Jackie Chan so deeply, it is important to understand who Bruce Lee actually was. Not the celluloid icon who would later be endlessly imitated and mythologized, but the real human being. Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco in 1940 and raised in Hong Kong, the son of a Cantonese opera star. He was small, wiry, and possessed of a ferocious intelligence that applied itself to everything he touched, including his body. He trained obsessively. Those who knew him described a man who treated his body as a scientific instrument, pushing it to extremes that bordered on the irrational. He performed one-finger push-ups. He could hold an extended arm and flick his wrist so fast that the motion was essentially invisible to the naked eye. He developed his own philosophy of martial arts, which he called Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, a system that rejected rigid styles and embraced adaptability, economy, and directness above all else. Bruce was deeply influenced by Western boxing, fencing, and philosophy alongside traditional Wing Chun Kung Fu. He read voraciously Descartes, Krishnamurti, Alan Watts. He believed that martial arts were ultimately a path to self-knowledge, and that the greatest opponent a fighter ever faced was himself. These were not the thoughts of a man who wanted to beat people up. They were the thoughts of a man who wanted to transcend the very concept of combat. And yet, in pure physical terms, Bruce Lee was also almost certainly one of the most dangerous human beings who has ever walked the earth. Not in the hyperbolized, mythologized sense that the internet loves, but in the very practical sense that people who trained with him, serious martial artists, world-class athletes, consistently walked away shaking their heads. He was faster than seemed possible. His power-to-weight ratio was extraordinary, and his timing, the most elusive quality in all of martial arts, was simply perfect. For Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee was simultaneously an inspiration and an impossibility. Jackie had grown up training in the Peking Opera School, a grueling institution where children were taught acrobatics, drama, singing, and martial arts under conditions that would be considered abusive by any modern standard. He emerged from that school physically extraordinary, flexible, fearless, and possessed of a timing and physical awareness that would eventually make him the greatest stuntman actor of his generation. But Bruce Lee was something else entirely. When Jackie watched Bruce move, he did not see technique. He saw nature. There was nothing mechanical about it. Nothing you could break down and replicate through repetition. Bruce moved the way water moves, finding the fastest, most efficient path without apparent effort. Jackie understood, in a way that only another martial artist could understand, that what he was seeing was not just talent. It was the result of a lifetime of thinking, questioning, and relentless experimentation. The incident on the set of Game of Death left a permanent mark on Jackie, not in a traumatic sense, but in the sense of a revelation. He had tested the waters and found them bottomless. Bruce could have embarrassed him publicly, could have made an example of him in front of the entire crew. Instead, he delivered his lesson with quiet precision and, by all accounts, without cruelty. That restraint impressed Jackie almost as much as the speed. When Bruce Lee died in July 1973 at the age of 32, the shock that rippled through Hong Kong and then the world was not merely the shock of a celebrity death. It was the shock of losing something genuinely irreplaceable. He had been making Enter the Dragon, the film that would introduce him to mainstream Western audiences on a scale he had never experienced before. He never got to see its release. He never got to see the world change because of him. The Hong Kong film industry, which had been built in large part on Bruce's shoulders, was suddenly faced with an uncomfortable question. What now? The answer the industry came up with was, initially, deeply uninspiring. A wave of Bruce Lee imitators, Bruceploitation, as it came to be known, flooded the market. Actors with names like Bruce Liu, Bruce Lee, and Dragon Lee appeared in cheap imitations designed to exploit the appetite Bruce had created without possessing any of his actual gifts. Jackie Chan was initially part of this wave, packaged by producers who hoped audiences would accept him as a substitute. It was a profound mismatch. Jackie was not Bruce Lee and could never be Bruce Lee. He was something different, something that had not yet been named or understood. It took years and the creative freedom to develop his own style before Jackie found the voice that would make him one of the most beloved entertainers on earth. Where Bruce was serious, Jackie was comic. Where Bruce burned with intensity, Jackie deflected with self-deprecating humor. Where Bruce presented the martial artist as an almost superhuman figure of power and precision, Jackie presented him as a lovable underdog who got hurt, made mistakes, and triumphed through persistence rather than perfection. It was a completely different proposition, and it worked because it was completely honest. In the decades that followed, Jackie Chan spoke about Bruce Lee many times. What is striking about these interviews, stretching from the 1980s all the way through to the 2010s, is the consistency of the emotion. There's no ambivalence, no complicated revisionism, no attempt to position himself as an equal or a successor. There is only admiration, tinged with something that looks very much like awe. In one widely quoted interview, Jackie was asked directly to compare himself to Bruce Lee. His answer was immediate and unequivocal. There was no comparison, not in the false modesty sense that public figures sometimes deploy, but in the literal sense. He described Bruce as operating in a different dimension, faster, sharper, more complete. Jackie spoke of watching Bruce on set and being unable to follow the movements, even while standing 2 feet away. He also spoke, repeatedly, about the incident with the punch. Each retelling carried the same mix of embarrassment and gratitude. Embarrassment because he had been young and stupid enough to try it. Gratitude because Bruce had been generous enough to use it as a lesson rather than a humiliation. Jackie described it as one of the most important moments of his education, not in fighting, but in understanding what it meant to be truly good at something. What Bruce showed him, Jackie said, was not just speed or power. It was presence. Complete, undivided, total presence. When Bruce was in a moment, he was entirely in it. No hesitation, no self-consciousness, no gap between intention and action. That quality, Jackie suggested, was what separated real masters from everyone else in any field. And it was a quality he spent his entire career trying, in his own way, To approach point, one of the things that made Bruce Lee genuinely unusual among martial artists and among action film stars was that he thought carefully and wrote extensively about what he was doing and why. His notes and journals, published posthumously as Tao of Jeet Kune Do, reveal a mind that was engaged in a serious philosophical project. He was not simply trying to figure out how to hit people harder. He was trying to understand the relationship between mind, body, and action, and how a human being could bring those three elements into perfect alignment. His most famous idea, expressed in countless forms across his writing and his rare interviews, was that the practitioner should aim to be like water. Water has no fixed shape. It fills whatever container it is placed in. It can be still and gentle, or it can be an unstoppable force. It does not resist, it flows. Bruce saw this as the ideal state of the martial artist, responsive, adaptable, without ego, without rigidity. This philosophy made him a strange figure in the martial arts world of his time, which was dominated by rigid systems, complex forms, and the idea that any given style held the key to ultimate effectiveness. Bruce disagreed fundamentally. He trained with everyone: wrestlers, boxers, judoka, Wing Chun practitioners, fencers, and took from each what worked, discarding what did not. He was, in this sense, 50 years ahead of the mixed martial arts revolution that would reshape combat sports in the 21st century. He also believed that film could be a vehicle for genuine martial arts expression, not just choreographed performance, but real technique, real speed, real power captured on camera. His frustration with the way martial arts had been presented in earlier Hong Kong films was part of what drove him to work so hard on the craft of on-screen combat. He wanted audiences to see something real, and he was willing to push himself and everyone around him to exhaustion to achieve it. In the end, what the relationship between Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan illuminates most clearly is the difference between genius and talent, and how, if the person with talent is wise enough, an encounter with genius can redirect an entire life. Jackie Chan was always going to be exceptional. The training he received, the physical gifts he possessed, the comic timing he developed, these would have found expression regardless. But the experience of working near Bruce Lee, of testing himself against that immovable standard, shaped the direction of his exceptionalism in ways that are impossible to fully quantify. Jackie learned from Bruce what not to try to be. He learned that attempting to replicate Bruce Lee's intensity and power would be pointless and probably disastrous. He learned that his own path had to be his own, built on his specific gifts, his specific personality, his specific relationship with an audience. In that sense, the punch he never landed was one of the most productive moments of his career. Bruce Lee's legacy is vast and complicated. He changed the way the world thought about Asian people, about martial arts, about action cinema. He created a template for the action hero that has never truly been superseded, only copied, diluted, or reimagined. His influence on everyone from Muhammad Ali to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, from UFC fighters to Hollywood directors, is direct and documented. But perhaps his most interesting legacy is the quieter one. The effect he had on the people around him, the stuntmen and extras and young performers who brushed up against his orbit and went away changed. Jackie Chan is the most famous of these, but he is not the only one. The people who knew Bruce personally, who trained with him, worked with him, or simply watched him move, all carry something of that encounter with him. A standard, a memory of what full human potential, applied without restraint, actually looks like. Jackie Chan is now in his 70s, a global superstar with a career that spans half a century and more than 150 films. He has performed stunts that have broken nearly every bone in his body. He has made audiences laugh and gasp in equal measure. He has become one of the most recognizable human beings alive. And yet, in every interview in which Bruce Lee's name comes up, something shifts in his expression. It is not sadness, exactly, though there is some of that. The grief of a young man who lost someone he was only beginning to understand. It is something closer to reverence. The kind of reverence that comes from having stood close to something extraordinary and known, in your gut, what you were looking at. Jackie Chan threw a punch at Bruce Lee and learned, in the millisecond before Bruce neutralized it, everything he needed to know about the distance between where he was and where true mastery lived. He has been walking toward that distance ever since. So, in their own ways, have the rest of us, watching. rewinding, marveling, and trying to understand how one small man, gone before he was barely grown, managed to change everything he touched. That is the story of the punch that never landed. And it is, in many ways, one of the most important punches in the history of cinema.